Sometimes the hardest stories to tell are the ones about love, not the kind that lifts you up, but the kind that slowly empties you out until there's nothing left. I'm lying here in this hospital bed, looking out at the gray winter sky, and I think it's finally time to share mine. My name is Anna Maria Rossi. I'm 79 years old, and this is the story of how I gave everything I had to the people I loved most, only to discover that love doesn't always travel in both directions. I came to America when I was 22, fresh off the boat from a small village outside Naples. The year was 1968, and I carried nothing but a battered suitcase and dreams stitched together with hope. I met Tony Rossi 3 months after arriving, a handsome man with dark eyes and promises that tasted like honey on his lips. We married within 6 months. I thought I'd found my fairy tale. Reality, as it often does, had different plans. Tony loved two things more than he loved me: whiskey and the idea of getting rich quick. He'd work for a few months, then lose his job because he showed up drunk, or he wouldn't show up at all. By the time I was 25, we had two babies, Marco and Sophia, and Tony was more absent than present. The rent didn't care about his excuses. The landlord didn't accept apologies instead of money. Our children needed food, diapers, clothes, so I became a seamstress. I'd learned to sew from my mother back in Italy, watching her nimble fingers transform fabric into beauty. In America, I transformed fabric into survival. I found work at a small tailor shop in the Bronx, run by an elderly Jewish man named Mr. Goldstein, who took pity on this young Italian mother with broken English and desperate eyes. He taught me the American way of tailoring, how to alter suits for businessmen, how to hem wedding dresses for brides I'd never meet, how to make invisible repairs on expensive coats. When I wasn't at the shop, I worked from home. I'd set up my Singer sewing machine, my most precious possession, bought with 3 months of saved pennies, right next to the kitchen table. I'd sew while watching the children, while cooking dinner, while Tony snored off another bottle in the bedroom. The rhythmic hum of that machine became the soundtrack of my life. Click, 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 the sound of needles piercing fabric and dreams piercing reality. By 1972, we had Teresa. By 1974, Paul completed our family. 4 children, one unreliable husband, and me, working 16 hours a day to keep us afloat. I remember my hands in those years, always moving, always aching. My fingers developed calluses in strange places from pushing needles through thick fabric. My back curved from hunching over the machine. My eyes strained in the dim light of our cramped apartment because we couldn't afford to waste electricity. But I never complained. These were my children. This was my choice. I didn't buy myself new clothes. Why would I when I could make them? Except I never had time to make them for myself. I wore the same 3 dresses for years, rotating them, mending them when they tore, letting out seams when I gained weight from stress and cheap pasta. The children, though, my children always looked nice. Marco had the best pants in his class. Sophia wore dresses I stayed up until 2 in the morning to finish, with delicate smocking and careful embroidery. Teresa and Paul never went to school in anything less than perfect. The other mothers at school would compliment my children's clothes, and I'd smile, proud. They didn't know those outfits were assembled from scraps, from the leftover fabric Mr. Goldstein let me take home, from the insides of old coats I'd find at thrift stores. They didn't need to know. My children never needed to feel poor, even though we were. Tony died when I was 55. The doctors called it liver cirrhosis. I called it inevitable. I stood at his funeral in 1999 wearing a black dress I'd sewn the night before, and I felt something I'd never expected to feel at my husband's death: relief. Not joy, never that. He was still the father of my children, still the young man who'd once made me laugh, but relief that maybe, finally, I could stop carrying his weight too. I was wrong. Sophia's marriage fell apart 2 years after her father died. She showed up at my door at midnight with two crying toddlers, mascara streaming down her face, and nowhere else to go. Her husband had been cheating with a woman from his office. I held my daughter while she sobbed and told her the same thing my mother told me years ago. Men can break your heart, but you don't have to let them break your spirit. She moved into my small apartment with Elena and Sophia, my granddaughters. I was still working. My hands weren't as fast as they used to be. My eyes needed stronger glasses, but I could still sew. Now I was feeding 5 mouths instead of one. The girls needed school supplies, shoes that fit their growing feet, birthday parties so they wouldn't feel different from other children whose parents were still together. I worked. I always worked. Marco, my firstborn, my son, who I dreamed would be a doctor or lawyer, started a construction business in 2003. He was so excited, so full of plans. I gave him $10,000 from my savings, money I'd been setting aside for emergencies, for retirement, for that mythical someday when I might stop working. 6 months later, he called me crying. The business had failed. He owed $80,000. "Mama," he said, his voice cracking like it did when he was a little boy, "I don't know what to do. They're going to take everything." What could I do? He was my son. I'd worked my whole life to give him opportunities I never had. I couldn't watch him lose everything now. I sold my apartment, the small one-bedroom I'd finally managed to buy after decades of renting. It wasn't worth much, but it was enough to save Marco from bankruptcy. I moved into an even smaller place, a studio in a neighborhood where I heard gunshots sometimes at night. But Marco was safe. That was what mattered. Teresa's divorce came next, in 2005. She needed a lawyer, a good one, because her husband was trying to take custody of their son. The lawyer cost $15,000. I had it in my account, barely, from the years of living on nothing but rice and beans, from never going to restaurants, from cutting my own hair in the bathroom mirror. "Take it," I told her. "Your son needs you." Then Paul, my baby, came to me with shining eyes and a dream. He wanted to open an Italian restaurant, a place that would serve the kind of food our family made, the recipes from the old country. It was 2008, right before the economy crashed, though we didn't know that yet. He needed $50,000 to get started. I had $47,000 left, my entire life savings. "Mama, this is it," Paul said, holding my hands. "This is how I'm going to make you proud, how I'm going to make sure you never have to work again." I gave him everything. Every penny I'd saved from 46 years of sewing, of denying myself, of choosing my children's futures over my own security. The restaurant failed within 2 years. The economy crashed, people stopped eating out, and Paul didn't have enough experience to keep it afloat. He declared bankruptcy. All that money, gone. But Paul looked at me with such guilt, such pain, that I held him and told him it was okay. "Money comes and goes," I said. "You're my son. That's forever." I was 70 by then. My hands shook too much to sew anymore. Not from age, the doctors said, but from nerve damage from decades of repetitive motion. My eyes had cataracts. My back had permanent curvature from all those years hunched over the sewing machine. I applied for Social Security and got a small check each month, barely enough for rent and food. I lived on generic cereal and weak tea. I took the bus everywhere because I couldn't afford a car. I wore sweaters with holes in them because I couldn't see well enough anymore to mend them properly. But I was okay. I'd survived worse. When I turned 75 in 2019, right before the world changed with the pandemic, my body finally gave up on me. I started shaking uncontrollably. I dropped things, cups, plates, the phone. Walking became difficult. I'd shuffle along, afraid of falling. The diagnosis came quick: Parkinson's disease. Paul came to the neurology appointment with me. He held my hand when the doctor explained what this meant: progressive decline, eventual inability to care for myself, tremors that would get worse, not better. "Don't worry, Mama," Paul said in the parking lot afterward. "You'll come live with me and Jennifer. I promised I'd take care of you, remember, for the rest of your life." I cried with relief. After everything, after all the giving and sacrificing, I wouldn't be alone. My son would be there. I moved into Paul's house in the suburbs 2 weeks later. They had a nice guest room with a window overlooking the backyard. Jennifer, his wife, smiled when she helped me unpack, though the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The first month was okay. I tried to be useful. I'd fold laundry with my shaking hands, though it took 3 times as long. I'd try to help with dinner, though I'd often drop vegetables or forget what I was doing mid-recipe. The Parkinson's was progressing faster than anyone expected. By the second month, I needed help getting dressed. The buttons were impossible. Zippers defeated me. I started having accidents because I couldn't get to the bathroom fast enough. Jennifer started doing my laundry separately with extra bleach. Her mouth tight with disgust she tried to hide. I heard them fighting one night, their voices carrying through the walls. "She's your mother, Paul, but this is too much," Jennifer said. "She needs professional care. She needs, I don't know, a facility or something. I can't just throw my mother in a nursing home." "Why not? She threw money at all of you for your whole lives. Now maybe it's time someone else dealt with this." I lay in that guest room bed, shaking, tears running down my wrinkled cheeks, and realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I was a burden. After 79 years of being the strong one, the provider, the solver of problems, I had become a problem that needed solving. 3 weeks later, Paul came into my room looking like he might be sick. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Mama, I've been looking into some options," he said. "There's this really good facility. It's state funded so it won't cost much, and they specialize in Parkinson's care. The staff is great. They have activities, other residents you could make friends with." My hands shook harder. "I don't want to go to a nursing home. I want to stay with my family. Mama, please understand. Jennifer's father wants to visit, and we need the guest room. And honestly, we both work full time. We can't give you the care you need, and watching you like this, it's hard for us. It hurts to see you suffer. So it hurts them to watch me suffer." That's what he said. Not that he wanted to ease my suffering, but that watching it made him uncomfortable. "When?" I whispered. "Next week. I already filled out the paperwork." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rage. I wanted to remind him of every sacrifice, every dollar, every sleepless night I'd spent making sure he had opportunities I never did. But what good would it do? He'd already decided. They all had. Sophia came to help pack my things. Marco sent a text saying he supported whatever was best. Teresa called and cried, but didn't offer an alternative. The Shady Pine State Nursing Facility was exactly what you'd expect from a place with state in its name. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, the smell of industrial cleaner barely masking other smells underneath. My room was tiny, barely big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a chair. I shared a bathroom with 3 other residents. Paul and Jennifer helped me settle in. Paul kept saying it was actually pretty nice, and you'll make lots of friends here. Jennifer was on her phone the whole time. When they left, Paul kissed my forehead and said, "We'll visit all the time, Mama. I promise." That was 4 months ago. They never came back. I called Marco the first week. "I'm in a meeting, Mama. Can I call you back?" He didn't call back. I called Teresa. "The kids are sick, Mama. I can't talk right now." She never picked up again. I called Sophia. "My car broke down, Mama. I can't make it this week." Next week became next month, became never. I called Paul every day for 2 weeks before I stopped. He never answered. Not once. My 79th birthday came in January during one of those bitter cold snaps where the wind cuts through you like a knife. I sat in the common room watching other residents receive visitors, flowers, balloons, cards. The nurse brought me a small piece of cake, vanilla with chocolate frosting, the kind they buy in bulk from the grocery store. "Happy birthday, Anna," she said kindly. She was one of the good ones, a young woman named Jessica who actually remembered our names and talked to us like people instead of tasks to complete. I couldn't eat the cake. My hands shook too badly to hold the fork, and my throat was too tight with tears. I went back to my room and called each of my children one more time. "Marco, I'm in a meeting." "Teresa, the kids are sick." "Sophia, my car broke down." Paul, straight to voicemail. I hung up and stared at my phone. A cheap flip phone because I couldn't manage a smartphone with my trembling fingers. I looked at the 4 names in my contacts. 4 children I'd given everything to. 4 people who couldn't spare 5 minutes on their mother's birthday. 3 months later, in April, I had a bad fall. They took me to the hospital with a suspected hip fracture. The social worker, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Chen, needed to contact my family about medical decisions and financial responsibility. She called all 4 of my children. For that, they showed up. They came into my hospital room together, the 4 of them, looking uncomfortable and awkward. Marco in his business suit, Teresa in her yoga pants, clearly annoyed to be pulled away from her routine. Sophia with her designer purse and manicured nails. Paul with Jennifer at his side like a guard dog. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They didn't ask about the fall or if I was in pain. They went straight to Mrs. Chen to discuss the paperwork. "We need to make sure this is all covered by Medicare and Medicaid," Jennifer said loudly, as if I couldn't hear from my bed 6 feet away. "We're not responsible for any costs, right?" Mrs. Chen looked at them with thinly veiled disgust. "Your mother's care is covered by her insurance, yes." "Good," Marco said, "because none of us are in a position to." "I understand," Mrs. Chen cut him off. They finally approached my bed. Sophia kissed the air near my cheek. "Hi, Mama. You're looking better." I was looking terrible, and we both knew it. My face was bruised from the fall. My hair, once my pride, was thin and completely white now, poorly cut by whatever aid had time to trim it. I reached under my pillow where I'd asked Jessica the nurse to place 4 envelopes that morning. My hands shook as I gave one to each child. "What's this?" Paul asked. "Read it," I whispered. The The Parkinsons had weakened my voice too. They opened the envelopes. Inside each one was a single piece of paper with a single sentence I'd asked Jessica to write for me in clear handwriting. I gave you everything. You gave me loneliness. I forgive you, but I also let you go. The silence in that room was deafening. Mama, that's not fair, Teresa started. Fair? The word came out stronger than I expected. Fair? I worked 16 hours a day so you could have clothes and food. I sold my home so Marco could avoid bankruptcy. I gave Teresa every penny for her lawyer. I gave Paul my life savings for a restaurant. And when I needed you, not your money, just your presence, where were you? We've been busy, Sophia began. Too busy for a phone call? Too busy to visit your mother on her birthday? Too busy to check if I'm still alive? They had no answer for that. I've changed my will, I continued. Everything I have left, which isn't much, just $5,000, is going to Margaret. Who the hell is Margaret? Marco demanded. My roommate at Shady Pines. She has no family, no one. When she dies, no one will bury her, so my money will give her a funeral, a dignified goodbye, something I'm not sure I'll get from any of you. Jennifer's face turned red. After everything Paul sacrificed for you. Sacrificed? I actually laughed, though it hurt. What did Paul sacrifice? What did any of you sacrifice? I'm the one who sacrificed. Every day of my life, I sacrificed my youth, my health, my dreams, my future, all of it for you. And you couldn't even sacrifice one afternoon to visit me. You can't do this, Paul said, his voice rising. That money should go to your children. Why? So you can waste it like you wasted the last $50,000 I gave you? No, it's my money, and it's going to someone who'll appreciate it. We'll sue, Marco threatened. Sue me then. I'll be dead soon anyway. The lawyers will cost you more than you'll get. They left after that. All four of them, angry and self-righteous, convinced somehow that they were the injured parties in this story. I've been back at Shady Pines for 2 months now. The hip wasn't broken, just badly bruised, but I'm weaker. Everything is harder. Some days I can barely get out of bed. Margaret, my roommate, turned 83 last week. She was a librarian for 40 years, never married, never had children. She's the kindest person I've met in years. We sit together in the common room, two old women abandoned by life in different ways, and we keep each other company. You know, Margaret said to me yesterday, I used to think I missed out by never having a family, but seeing what you went through, maybe I dodged a bullet. I squeezed her hand with my shaking one. Maybe we both did in different ways. The lawyers came yesterday to finalize my will, everything in order. When I die, and it won't be long now, I can feel my body giving up more each day. Margaret will have enough for a proper burial, flowers at her funeral, a nice headstone, maybe even a small reception afterward. More than I suspect I'll have. I don't regret loving my children. I don't even regret the sacrifices I made. They were mine to make, my choices. What I regret is expecting reciprocity. I gave them everything thinking they'd understand the value of family, of loyalty, of showing up for people you love. But you can't teach people to care. You can't force gratitude. You can't make someone love you the way you love them. Here's what I've learned in my 79 years, what I wish I could tell my younger self when she stepped off that boat in 1968 with stars in her eyes. Give because you want to give, not because you expect something in return. Love your children, yes, but also love yourself. Save something, anything, for your own future because no one else will. And most importantly, know when to let go. I spent decades holding on to the belief that family was everything, that sacrifice was noble, that if I just gave enough, loved enough, worked hard enough, I'd be valued and cherished in my old age. I was wrong, but I'm not bitter anymore. I was for a while. I was angry and hurt and confused. How could the babies I nursed, the children I clothed and fed, the adults I saved from bankruptcy and divorce and failure, how could they just forget me? Then I realized they didn't forget me. They just never saw me the way I saw them. To them, I was a resource, a solution to problems, an ATM that dispensed money and second chances. When the ATM broke down and needed maintenance, they didn't know what to do with it, so they stored it somewhere out of sight. I forgive them, not because they deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger at 79 with Parkinson's disease is exhausting. I choose peace instead. I also choose to let them go. They're no longer my children in any meaningful sense. They're strangers who share my DNA, and that's okay. I have Margaret now. I have Jessica the nurse who brings me extra pudding and sits with me when the shaking gets bad. I have Mr. Patterson down the hall who tells the same 3 jokes every day and makes me laugh every time. This is my family now, the people who show up. There's a young woman who volunteers here sometimes, reading to residents. She's maybe 23, 24, the same age I was when I arrived in America with nothing. Last week she asked me what advice I'd give my younger self. I thought about it for a long time. I'd tell her to work hard, yes, but not at the expense of everything else, I finally said. I'd tell her that loving your children doesn't mean erasing yourself. I'd tell her to save something, money, yes, but also time and energy and dreams for the person she'll be at 79, because that person deserves a life too. Would you tell her not to have children? The young woman asked. No, I'd tell her to have children if she wants them, but I'd also tell her that children grow up and leave. That's what they're supposed to do. And when they do, you need to have built a life that isn't entirely about them. Otherwise, you'll be left with nothing but echoes and empty rooms. The young woman wrote that down in a notebook she carries. Maybe she'll remember, maybe she won't. Maybe she'll make all the same mistakes I did. That's how life works. I look out my window now at the spring rain falling on the parking lot. Soon it will be summer, then fall, then another winter. I probably won't see another spring. The doctors don't say it outright, but I can read it in their faces when they check my vitals. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of dying alone. But then I remember, I won't be alone. Margaret will be here. Jessica will be here. Mr. Patterson will probably tell his jokes at my bedside until the very end. That's more than some people get. My children made their choice. They chose comfort over obligation, distance over discomfort, forgetting over facing what they'd done. I can't change that. All I can do is make peace with it and spend whatever time I have left with people who actually care. If there's a lesson in all this, it's this. The truest measure of love isn't what people say or promise. It's what they do when you can't give them anything in return. It's who shows up when you have nothing left to offer but your broken, trembling self. My children showed me who they really were, and I finally, after all these years, believed them. I gave them everything. They gave me loneliness, but I also gave myself something in the end. Permission to let go, to forgive, to find peace in these final days with people who deserve my love because they give it freely in return. That has to be enough because it's all I have. And you know what? It is enough. It really is.